Earlier this month, former Clark County Sheriff John Clements sued Clark County and its commissioners under the Fair Labor Standards Act, alleging he was the only officer in the county to cover law enforcement duties 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 months after his only 2 deputies resigned. Clements alleges the county refused to hire a new deputy or let him contract with other agencies for help while a new hire received training, and that the employee shortage caused him to collapsed twice on the job due to exhaustion and resulted in hospitalization. The Post-Register reports that Clark County has long struggled with employment issues. The county has not yet filed a response to the lawsuit. Idaho Reports has reached out for comment and has not yet heard back from Clark County. On Friday, I sat down with Canyon County Sheriff Kieran Donahue to discuss hiring issues county sheriffs are facing and some potential solutions to those problems. Sheriff Donahue, thanks so much for joining us. Through your role in the Sheriff's Association, were you aware of the issues that Clark County was facing recruiting and retaining deputies?
Yeah, it's pretty well known. It's common knowledge, really, especially our rural communities, rural counties. So as a board member for the Idaho Sheriff's Association, of course, that information does come to me, as well as the other board members, maybe a little bit more than others. And the fact is, it's real detrimental to, of course, that community and that jurisdiction. And you see other sheriffs stepping in to assist as much as they can, but at the same time, they have their jurisdiction to operate and to take care of. And then when you look at the jail situations, you know, there's literally no jail at this time in terms of accommodating. So you have to move those people to another jurisdiction. So
which also takes hours away from the deputies' work.
Absolutely.
Day. Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, everybody's crowded, right? Everybody has limitations, and so you're pushing off into another jurisdiction. Again, thank God those sheriffs are such great colleagues. But it does, there's a strain, and the strain with whether it's Idaho State Police or whether it's Jefferson County, Bonneville County, who's taking that overflow, and then of course trying to put manpower out there to make sure the citizens are safe. Again, it's a real strain on their counties, but they are good neighbors.
And the issues recruiting and retaining deputies, that's not unique to Clark County.
Not at all. It's widespread, especially across the rural counties, but really counties like ours. I mean, we're the second largest county in the state, and everybody has the same problem. And that just doesn't happen yesterday. That's been happening for some time. And so there's lots of factors that enter into that, and it's how we are addressing that as a law enforcement profession. We're meeting today with Idaho Criminal Justice Commission to talk about that issue. So it's very widespread, and it's something that we absolutely have to address because the profession needs people to come in. The profession also needs people to stay in that profession. And we have very hard and harsh background, evaluations, and so really less than 1% of the people that apply even get in. And it's because,
really?
and that's appropriate, right? We're going to really scrutinize who we let into this profession because they have to be the right people. There's always that bad actor that gets by. We know that nationwide, and even in our own state. But the fact is, so few people getting in, that means they're a quality recruit, and now we want to keep those people. But first we got to get them in the door. And if there's not enough money, or if there's no housing, or many other factors, we're not even going to get them in the door.
And these are issues that affect urban and, as urban as Idaho gets, the big counties in Idaho and the rural counties. But let's focus on the rural counties for just a second. What are the challenges that are unique to places like Clark or Owyhee County or Camas County?
Well, they're rural, number one. We all love to go visit them, so we have a lot of people that go out into those areas, again, as kind of a transient population to go recreate and so on and so forth. But the real problem is the financial side of it. Those counties typically do not have the revenue base that a large urban area does, like Canyon County or Ada County or somewhere like that, Bonneville County. So the resources in terms of financial management are very, very thin. And so the challenge really becomes how do they, whether you're the Board of County Commissioners or a city council, how do you budget the money appropriately to take care of public safety? Because public safety has to be the core foundation of any government. Any government, doesn't matter how large or how small. And so what happens is people say, well, we got to take care of this, we got all this going on. and the law enforcement suffers. And so they pay lower wages, and unfortunately you get what you pay for a lot of times. And I don't mean that derogatorily, but you do. So somebody that may not have made the cut in my agency may go work for someone over there, and they're going to take them on because they're desperate to get those personnel in there. That's a detriment from a litigation and liability standpoint, and a risk management standpoint. So I think one of the biggest things is finances. This is a very dangerous profession, and we ask a lot of those people. You mentioned, like Clark County or Camas County or even Custer County, places like that, that your response time is really far and wide to get to where you need to be. And they have good people. I'm not saying that they don't. They have good people, but the problem is, how much are you paying? Those people have families. You have the consumer price index. You have inflation that you deal with. That needs to continually, the wages have to reflect that, and they often don't reflect that. Then you look at housing. There's another challenge of your rural community. Where are these people going to live? How are they going to afford housing when you have retirees and other people who are secondary homes buy up those properties and inflate that market value, and then you're paying a deputy this incredibly low wage, and they simply can't afford to live there. They simply can't.
Airbnbs too.
And Airbnbs.
The vacation rentals that are an income generator for the people who own them, but put even more pressure on that housing market.
They really do. And so the challenges are extreme for rural counties. Again, go back to the fact that the revenue base just isn't there. The tax base isn't there.
And let's talk a little bit about that, because when we're talking about, some of these rural counties are huge percentages of the land in those counties are owned by the federal government. And so if we're talking, about Custer County, they do get income from the federal government, payment in lieu of taxes. It's not as much as they would be making if they were taxing that.
You're right. You're right.
And so what are county commissioners supposed to do when they're worried about rising property taxes, which is something that we have heard over and over again? But they also need to pay for public safety.
I'll say it again. The core of any government has to be public safety. That's the foundational rock that we build on. Because if society is not safe, everything else goes to the wayside. Custer County is a great example. When Thompson Creek Mine was in full force, you had good economic value up there. You had a lot of good tax coming. That kind of replaced some of the other mining aspect that's gone away. It replaced some of the logging that had gone away. Whether you agree with logging or mining or cattle, the fact is that was a revenue base a tax that they could pull from, and it was a good use of our, as you say, the federal lands, right? But when that goes away, you have very, very limited industry in a place like that. So where's that tax going to come from? And when that tax is so limited, you're right. Those county commissioners, how do we appropriate the funding to take care of even the highways or the streets or the everything else they're responsible for?
Basic infrastructure.
Bare
bones.
And
right.
then yet we don't have enough to pay law enforcement. We don't have enough to build a jail to accommodate those who are arrested, who need to go to be held accountable to protect society. It doesn't matter if you're a small county or a small jail in a very large rural county or a large county jail like mine. There's people need to be held accountable, and like us or like them, those people then are back on the streets, and the victimization can continue. I mean, that's just one aspect of it. It's extremely challenging, but the burden is really upon, in terms of counties, the burden is upon the Board of County Commissioners. That's the job you signed up for, and it's a very difficult job. Not a job that I would want. I wouldn't want to be a commissioner, so I know the challenges that they have. You've got to focus on public safety. So you've got to find the dollars, and sometimes you have to cut other things to make sure those dollars are there, because you have to have qualified law enforcement with the tools, the equipment that they have to have. Like Custer County, you're going from Stanley to Mackey, right? I mean, that's a long response time.
Especially
if you don't have,
in the winter.
Right? If you don't have enough officers on the street or on the force, that's a long commute to get to that emerging situation or emergency situation.
We've talked a lot about rural counties, but how about Idaho's larger counties? You know, your own county, you mentioned, you have had issues recruiting deputies. We
have had, and I can tell you, I can come here today and tell you that we are in the best place we've ever been, probably in our history of our county. And what swung that pendulum, we, like everyone else, we were having a hard time recruit. And again, there's a lot of factors, political factors and things that happened for the last, let's say, 5-6 years that really affected law enforcement, good and bad, right? And the bad actors really affected law enforcement in a negative fashion. And even in our own county.
You're talking about reputation.
Yeah, and the image, the public trust.
Right.
When you look at again, even Canyon County has that, right? And so you have to weed those bad actors out. But in the meantime, society's like, hey, you know, we're really tired of this, forgetting that there's just bad actors in every box. And so we saw that same thing, but it wasn't so much the bad actors and reputation, it was the wages. The inconsistency of the wages that we were paying, because again, we're dependent upon those who set the budget, not myself, and so we can only pay so much. We were seeing people with 10, 12, 15 years walk out the door. We've put literally a couple of $1 million into that person by that time, when you look at benefits and salaries and training and expertise, and going to Nampa, going to Meridian, going to Ada County, going to Boise. And it was just ridiculous. It was like we were the training ground, because we're a very highly skilled organization.
The farm team for the rest
right,
of the
we were the farm team. It's like, but the taxpayer was taking the brunt of it because it's their money. And so when I brought in my new chief deputy, they really started digging even deeper. They could, the deepest dive we've ever taken, and we could show by empirical data, by the model that we built, that's irrefutable. In the last 2 years, we lost $3 million just in watching people walk out the door and then recruiting new ones and training. And we showed that with less than $1 million, we can change that. And so the Board of County Commissioners, before they left office, they agreed with us. They saw it, and we were able to bring all of our wages up for gun toters, for the commissioned officers, to where we're now at the top of that level. And there's a few that still outpay us, but that entry level. And I can tell you now that we are, with the people we have background today, and so in the last 6-8 months, we are full. We went from 25% down to 0%. That's an amazing statistic.
And it came down to pay.
It comes down to pay. And then there's always the argument, well, it's not just about money. No, it's not. It's about culture. It's about culture and money. But as we explained, if you can't afford to put food on the table or pay your rent or your mortgage, then it doesn't matter what the culture is. This could be the greatest place to work in the world, and I think ours is. But if you can't afford to work here, you're not going to work here anymore. If you can't afford to put kids' clothes on your kids' back and feed them, you're going to have to go somewhere else. And that's what we were seeing. People leaving the profession. People who shouldn't be leaving this profession because we need them. And so we have changed that. That course has been changed dramatically. We're thrilled. And what we're doing is we're sharing our model with anyone who wants it. Any sheriff's office, any chief of police. We're showing, and we're really giving the credit where it's due to the Board of County Commissioners as well, the last sitting board and the new sitting board who took it upon as well. We're just seeing drastic difference, and we're getting lateral recruits from numerous states. They're fleeing their own states to come to Idaho, but they're very qualified personnel, and of course we're still recruiting in our state as well. So you have to take those steps as a management, as executive team. You have to say, we've got to dig deeper. We've got to find the root of this problem. And we found it. And it was the pay. And we didn't just find it because we knew it for a long time. We proved it. We proved it through empirical data, through analysis that's irrefutable. And now we're seeing the benefit of that. And I can tell you, I had deputies before we did this 6-8 months ago living in camp trailers. Living in camp trailers, some across the river into Hawaii, because that's where they could afford to put a travel trailer because of the housing market in Canyon County and Treasure Valley. Think of that. And now go strap on that gun belt and that badge and go put in your 12-hour shift. And don't worry about the fact that you're going to come home to a camp trailer every night with 3 kids.
Yeah. Well, County Sheriff Kieran Donahue, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.